Welcome to the September meeting of Florida Veterans for Common Sense. We all recognize that today is 9/11, and so why don't we take a moment of silence to remember the victims of 9/11 and also the service members that were wounded and killed as a result of 9/11. So may we have a moment of silence. Thank you very much, and I'm pleased to announce our speakers for tonight. We have two speakers that we can be very proud of for what they're doing with their community and what they're doing for our state and country. We have Jim Nathan. He's a retired CEO of Lee Health, and he worked there for about 34 years as the CEO. He had about 40 years as national leadership consulting in that field. Since his retirement, he's like many of the rest of us. We retire, but we're still busy. He's worked at Gulf Coast University, and he served as an active dean for health and human services, and he presently serves as executive in residence and an adjunct professor for leadership coaching. And recently, he's a co-founder of the Southwest Florida Voices for Racial Justice and a co-founder of Floridians for Democracy. Our second speaker tonight is Jeff Cull, and Jeff graduated from the U.S. Naval Academy, flew the Navy's career-based S-3 Viking, and retired as a commander. He began his journalism career in 2000 as a reporter at the News Press and pursued public service journalism as an investigative reporter. He has won numerous awards in the state and national for his reporting. He co-founded the Florida Media Group in 2007 and served as its executive editor until 2022, when the founder sold the chain. He currently sits on the boards of a number of Southwest Florida nonprofits and is a co-founder of Floridians for Democracy. And you know from Jeff's bio that he's a veteran, but I'm also proud to announce that Jim is a veteran also. And he served as a reservist in the U.S. Army. So the one thing I'm really proud to say is both of these gentlemen are new members of Florida Veterans for Common Sense. And we expect that they will make a big contribution to our group, and we're certainly proud of the fact that they've started Floridians for Democracy. So Jim and Jeff, if you would tell us about that group that you've started and where it's headed and what you're trying to do.
We're really proud to be a member of your organization. I read through the bios of your board, and it's very impressive. And I think the thing, both our organizations have a lot of synergy. And I think that we can work together on a number of different issues. Some of our issues are different than, some of ours are different than yours, but there are some very common ones too. But working with an organization of veterans, you guys have such power. I mean, you're respected more than any other group in the state. And Floridians for Democracy, we don't have a center, a base like Florida Veterans does. And I think you guys, and have been doing for quite a number of years now, but I think there's a lot more to come, and you guys are in a perfect position to make things happen. I'm going to turn this over to Jim.
Thanks, Jeff. Tonight, I mean, our moment of silence at the very beginning, I think, was very appropriate as we think about 9/11. The immediate aftermath of 9/11 was a unification of this country to try to figure out who we are and where we're going. And we can debate the good and the bad of some mistakes and some great things that happened. But as we've been taught more recently, it's not the challenge from afar, it's the challenges from within that we need to be most concerned about. And this is where the opportunity to link forces with your wonderful group of veterans and to partner with others throughout the state. This may be to some people an overreaction or an underreaction, but there's sort of a new civil war going on in America. And if you haven't felt it in your own families and your friends of who you can talk about political issues with or current events with, somewhere you've missed something. But I have a feeling that the fact that you've band together under the umbrella of these concerned veterans and your voices of taking a look at things from clean water and the environment and all resurrect that or reinforce that. We came together in officially the 1st of May, but it was really emerging in the latter part of last year as many of us were beginning to hear the stories from friends that were being impacted and the fears that they had. And part of autocratic movements are the creation of fears, even if they're not necessarily real, but putting people in periods of concern. And what we think that we've been seeing in Florida is that under the guise of freedom, that every day we're actually losing the right to live free and to be treated fairly and respectfully. In the middle of February or latter part of February, Jeff and I got together purely by happenstance, and we began to have a discussion. I had no idea how he was going to react to this, and he immediately said, I don't know what it is that you're thinking of doing. And I said, well, it was just this morning. He said, but whatever it is, my wife and I are in fully. Jeff's wife was just completing her master's degree in genocide and the Holocaust. And so very much on their minds of what was happening in the 1930s and how in 1939, America had a 25,000 person group of people that went to Madison Square Gardens under the umbrella of America First and supporting Nazi and fascism. And the fact that we don't want to see that happen again today. So we decided to bring together a small group of people and have like an in-house focus group. And most of those people would only come and meet with us if this was a protected dialogue where they were going to bare their souls of experiences they were having, whether it was teaching and not knowing how to teach history, coming to get a person that headed up a foundation that got a massive federal grant for jobs training, but it required DEI training and local business leaders pulling their businesses out of it because the politics were such as trying to get away from DEI training. And we listened to each of those people, and it was really difficult and emotional. And afterwards we said, what are we going to do about this? And we started talking about having some kind of a discussion group of leaders of various organizations in Collier and Lee County. And we thought by the time we could put all those people together, we would be, the session in legislature would be over and we'd be well into the summer months. So we decided to do a focus group from Sarasota to Naples and invite 20 to 30 people on a Zoom call and have this discussion with them. 85 people showed up on the Zoom call. And after that was over, we got back together with our little initial group that we called the 1939 Project and decided that we wanted to incorporate under the umbrella of Floridians for Democracy and go statewide. And what we really have been looking at is that those that have traditionally espoused less government and more freedom are taking freedoms from women, banning books, harassing people who are LGBTQ, negatively impacting hard-fought focus on diversity, telling students they should not grasp the truth about some of the aspects of the country's shameful past with slavery. And many of the Blacks that I have been working closely with in Voices for Racial Justice were feeling a massive gut punch. We were off to a great start following the sad murder of George Floyd and the efforts of Black Lives Matter. But suddenly they just felt like, again, they're being let down by whites and let down by our society. And then we saw the rampant gerrymandering and the fact that Florida didn't even follow its own existing laws and the impact that that was having on voting rights and the ease of voting to make it harder for people to vote, and especially minorities and even students. And we saw that in the 2022 election, 2.8 million registered Democrats registered to vote did not vote. And over 2 million NPAs, no party affiliations, that were registered did not vote. And we don't really know whether that was a feeling of hopelessness or just largesse or what, but it just didn't happen. And then we saw more and more of activities that were marginalizing minorities in the state, people that we should be respecting for their differences. We all have differences, and we need to, and that should be a tenet of our nation. So, and then more recently, Florida removing 2 elected state's attorneys. That's another aspect of an autocratic movement, rather than letting the justice system or the voting system make that determination. There wasn't flagrant issues that were there. And Sarasota, and I'll conclude my comments with this, Sarasota is very much in the eye of the autocratic storm. What happened at New College that had was a small college, but it had a lot of very successful people that were building a career and went there because they wanted a small liberal arts college, suddenly being taken over, and basically the president being thrown out, the DEI person being thrown out, and new board members brought in to suddenly change the entire culture, and even taking seniors and juniors out of their dorms, their planned dorms, and putting in the baseball players. I mean, I love baseball, but that didn't make any sense to me. The attacks on the school systems, the board members joining that are anti-science, getting involved with the Sarasota Memorial Board, Steve Bannon and Mike Flynn making Sarasota County their home, Proud Boys, Oath Keepers, and their derivatives, all of this stuff coming in this area. And then you mentioned clean water and environment in your opening comments, Gene. And one other thing that's not given much recognition is that local voices for zoning ordinances have now been taken over by the state. And so people that have spent all this time debating and discussing in their own communities forget all the social issues. But now the businesses are being told what they can do and say. And it's not just Disney and Tampa Bay Rays. Businesses are being told what they can do and say. This is wrong. It should be of a concern for all of us. And that became the energy and the impetus, especially those 85 people that is now 650 people throughout the state, and partnerships like we have now with your group and others that are emerging. Give us a sense of hope that our voices can be heard. Our voices are conflicting, they're confusing. The other side, whether it's true or not, what they have to say, they've got their marching orders that are well-financed and very, very strong. We have to find ways of coming together, not to marginalize our own groups and entities that are partnering, but to find common language that we can all use to educate the public and to fight back and to stop democracy from being stolen away from us in our nation. So thanks for the opportunity to share that. Sorry if I went on too long, but I guess we got some time for interaction and discussions. Gene?
Excuse me. Thank you very much. Those were very good comments. And Jeff, do you have anything to add?
Yes, I do, but I'm going to go in a different direction than Jim. And I don't, one of the things that vexed us was, how do we get our message out? We know what our message is. We want to increase voter participation all across all demographics. We want to create laws that enhance democratic freedoms. We have a number of those messages, but our biggest problem was, how do we reach the people that we want to reach? And who are the people that we want to reach? It's very difficult to get your message out in a group, friends who knows friends who knows friends, emails, etc. So we embarked on a campaign to bring in a social media and digital company with vast political experience in data. So what we've done is we've got this group, and they've been working with us for probably close to a month now on how we want to reach the people that we want to reach and the demographic that we want to reach, and how do we target them. And we target them through a number of social media platforms. We target them with digital ads that show up on their social media. We target them with advertorial that we write that looks like a news story. I'm sure every news website you've ever been to, you scroll down to the bottom and there's a dozen different stories that you can click on from other people. And that's one of the things that we're going to be doing with our messaging. So with that program in place, we've decided, basically we had a big laundry list of items that the social media company could provide for us. And it got expensive to use all of them. So we decided we were going to break those down into smaller bites and target them during the time frame that we needed to target. For example, there are 4 seats available in congressional seats available on the East Coast that'll be voted on in January. The primaries in November. So one of the things that we decided was we would use our social media to engage with the groups that are supporting the most Democratic minded candidates. And we don't care if they're Republicans or Democrats, but we kind of all know where that's going. So we want to support those East Coast, the groups that support those East Coast candidates. The second item that we wanted to accomplish right away was support the state efforts to get the abortion ban reversed, which means we got to get signatures on petitions. And this kind of goes hand in hand with what you guys are trying to do with the clean water petition. And I think a program like this would really help you guys. I think you could increase the number of signatures dramatically. That's what we're hoping for. And from what we understand from the data, we have a good shot at really increasing the number of petition signers for the abortion issue. And the third item that we wanted to get to right away was a social media digital campaign to raise money for the organization. The initial founders each put in $5,000 apiece, and we've gotten some money from other organizations and individuals. But in order to pay for this campaign and for the other things that we really want to do, we need to raise some money. So the fundraising campaign is actually the first of our goals. And we're also, in addition to those 3, we're also going to use paid social media ads for Floridians for Democracy or a message. And those will show up on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, whatever. And then we're going to have a social media account manager so that we get our message out on time in the format that we need to have it in, and without us having to manage the platform. Most of us in our group are not digital savvy, nor are we social media savvy. So that's why we decided we'd had to bring on a consultant to do all this work. And we're very excited about it. they have they work with us very closely. They've offered to help any other organizations that that we might bring in with a campaign that they may want to do. So we could very easily partnership with a petition campaign for clean water and the abortion rights. I think that would be something to think about. So that's where we're at on social media and digital, and we're living in that world now. So we got to take advantage of it.
Okay, well, that's an awful lot. You've covered, both of you have covered an awful lot of ground. And I would remind people, if you're on Zoom and you have a question, please put it in the Q&A, and then we'll read that to the group, and we'll see if we can't get you an answer. One thing, if I may, just impose an observation, a very concerning observation is the fact that DeSantis is firing prosecutors, and particularly the last prosecutor that was fired. There's some good evidence that she may have been fired because she was investigating certain corruption with some of the police agencies. And that really sends a chill down my backbone, because one of the things that the Nazis did before Hitler completely consolidated his power was to put in a lot of their own prosecutors. And a lot of the black shirts with the Nazis, they were actually murdering people. And the reason they weren't prosecuted is because the prosecutors were appointed by the Nazi Party, and they simply pushed the investigations into the desk, and they were never followed up on. And so I'm not saying it's that bad, but there's the potential for it to be that bad, because that is directly contrary to the democratic norms that a democracy should have. Prosecutors have to be independent from the governor and independent from the president. And we don't have that when the governor can willy-nilly fire prosecutors and appoint what we might say in the military an ass kisser. And so that's a scary proposition. And so maybe you have a comment on that.
Gene, I mentioned that in my opening comments about the two state's attorneys, and I concur. Those were more recent events. Well, one was a year ago and the other one very recent. But all of this stuff, when you look at what's happening with the courts and trying to figure out how to stack the courts, and especially the Florida Supreme Court, we're going to see a number of really important issues that are going to be coming through that Florida Supreme Court. And it's hard to imagine that, I mean, it's easy to imagine that they're not going to be very favorable to the general public. They're going to be favorable to what DeSantis has been planning and working on. We'll see. We'd like to trust the courts. But you're right. I mean, whether it's the book banning or the or taking over of leadership, it's controlling the power and controlling all the systems all the way up through the system for a small minority of people to tell others how they should act, do, and create fear, so that even if it's not against a law, it's a fear that they might be breaking the law if they say something or do something or take some action or protest and speak out. And when we see these folks honoring the Orbans and the Ergodans and others at an international level, we should be concerned. And I think you've articulated really well, Gene.
Well, and he's got such control of the Florida legislature that they'll basically do his bidding. The University of Florida was getting a new president, and at the tail end of the legislative session, the legislature closed the open records rule on candidates for the University of Florida, so that they didn't have to the public couldn't know who the candidates were. And that was done just before the search. And it turns out that there was no search. Ben
There's only one candidate, only one candidate.
Yeah, only one candidate. Ben Sassy got the job, and he's got a pretty terrible record on freedoms.
I have a question. We've looked pretty hard for Republican candidates that would be outside of the category of MAGA, because, as a nonpartisan group, we could support Republicans or we could support Democrats or an independent. It doesn't matter to us if the candidates align with our positions. And we've looked real hard for a Republican candidate that we could support, but we haven't been able to find any because, as far as we could tell, they're all MAGA. And I use that term MAGA because, they accept the idea of the big lie, and they basically follow the Trump-DeSantis program. And so that's been a frustration for us. And I wonder if you have the same frustration with your work that you're starting out now.
Yes. It's, Sarasota and Lee County, Collier County, Southwest Florida is very red. We haven't had anybody on the opposite side elected for a couple decades. And so it's hard to find that candidate. And I saw this emerging years ago. I saw really good people on the Republican side get elected. And when they first went to Tallahassee, they voted their conscience, they voted their heart, and they were almost totally destroyed. And then they spent the rest of their time trying to get out of the deep water that they were in so that they would be on a committee and be able to get a bill put up for vote. And that was before it was anywhere near as vicious as it is today. And so the whole primary process does say the only way you're going to get elected is if you toe that far right line. And so finding a Republican, which is really essential. So one of the things that we've been focused on is that there are some national organizations that are asking the question of candidates specific to the democracy and specific questions of democracy. And do you support X, Y, and Z, and show how you support democracy, at least to get them on the record if they will answer at all, to define it. So getting those questions, it sort of goes to something Jeff said earlier, is getting common language. So there's a number of different organizations wanting to ask those questions, but get those questions right. I don't know what the right questions are. I'm way too wordy. But getting the questions right is essential to being able to ask the candidates. But that's because they're mostly going to be Republican anyway in Florida. And we just have to acknowledge that. But the other piece is, and David Pepper from Ohio says this very clearly, even if you're not going to win, the other side has got to have candidates. And you can't just look at this as an every 4-year thing of what happens in Washington. This is a grassroots thing at our school boards, at our city councils, at our state elections, et cetera. And don't just get fixated on every 4 years. The other side has been fixated on maybe losing the presidency, but they've been fixated on these smaller local offices where they have a lot more opportunity to win and a lot more opportunity to control. And we've been way too wishy-washy in that. We've got to, and I think Jeff talked about it, voting, getting people out to vote is essential.
Those are very good points. And one thing that we would, I don't know if it's advice because it's really not, but it may be helpful to you. We found over the last couple of cycles that Republican candidates in general do not respond to our questionnaires. They just ignore them.
Yeah.
And that's a sad state of affairs because that was not the case several years ago. In the past, Republicans and Democrats would both respond to our questionnaires, but our experience the last time we tried it, we got such a little response from Republicans that it's honestly not worth the effort because they just won't respond. And that's very frustrating, needless to say.
And that's the Republican playbook, unfortunately.
And why do you think that is, Jeff?
Well, I think overall they decided that the presidency is going to be very difficult to keep in power, and so they decided that their best efforts would be at grassroots, and that's why the school boards were the first to be attacked. We don't have a chapter of Moms for Liberty here in Lee County, but so we haven't felt too much of the effects of the book bannings, except in the schools, and that's where they're banned the most. And if they can control the young population and move them up, then they'll control for a long time. And they worry about universities probably the most. That's probably the most liberal groups. And I think they're heading right in that direction.
Well, universities, the reason they want to weaken the universities is because universities are institutions for truth. They study history and they study culture, and one of the first things these fascist governments do is ban gender studies, for example. And the reason is they want to maintain, some kind of male-dominated hierarchy. That's the way they operate. So you're not going to allow gender studies in your universities. You're not going to allow the teaching of real history in the university because, as I think DeSantis said, you make people feel bad.
Yeah.
Right. So, Gene, that's why on the 19th, 7 o'clock on the 19th, our next Floridians for Democracy, all systems go. Everybody's invited, and any of your group that would like to attend are welcome to. We have Dr. Pat Oker, who was the president of New College, who was summarily fired. We have the immediate past superintendent of schools from Collier County Schools. And the focus is education under siege and what can we do about it. And we actually have a couple of people that will be given a little bit of time to talk about what they're doing as a grassroots group called the Purple Group to try to communicate with the school board and to overcome some of these concerns that we have, not just with the books, but overall education, the fact that people aren't going in wanting to be teachers, the fact that there's so many fears among teachers and people concerned about losing their jobs. So we think it'll be a great educational tool, but you're absolutely right. I mean, this effort of controlling education is part of that playbook. And now we've got it from K through post-grad.
Well, make sure, I know you will anyway, but please make sure that you send me the appropriate blurbs on that and the notices so that I can get them out to our group. And so we do have some questions on questions and answers. And I see somebody at the podium. I can't tell who it is, unfortunately. But if Rich could read the question so we could try to answer that.
Okay, sorry, Gene. You can actually access the questions yourself in the Q&A. But anyway, this one's from Vicky Neiswander, and she says, please work to get a good candidate to replace Michael Grant, term limited, in Tassidomus backyard. It would be a big statement. We are not sheep. Did you get that?
Well, that's important. Jim or Jeff, do you have a comment on that? I'm not familiar with that race personally.
Yeah, that's Naples. Yes, we're definitely going to work on that. I agree with you 100%.
Finding, you already said it, finding good candidates to run in any of these races that really and truly are focused on protecting and preserving democracy is a massive challenge. But as David Pepper said, even if you lose, having a candidate out there gets messages there because people have to debate and discuss them.
And I see it's Mark standing at the microphone. Mark, do you have a question?
Somewhat, yes. I was wondering, did any of you folks see the president's address today?
No.
He focused a lot on unity, the way it was after 9/11 when the country came together, and it was a very well put together address, and it just goes against everything that the other side keeps talking about, which is fear. They keep everybody in fear all the time. They're afraid of the boogeyman. They're afraid of anything that goes against their norms. And they preach the fear really well. There just has to be a way to break through and just, life isn't all fear.
Well, thanks, Mark. We appreciate it. And that's your comments are very consistent with what Jim started with the 9/11, how united the country was. And we've let that slip away. And we've let that slip away for a lot of different reasons. But there's movement afoot in this country that they're simply, in my opinion, they're simply not committed to our democratic norms. And the reason I say that is because I listen to what they say, and I also look at their actions, like DeSantis firing these prosecutors. Ronna, good to see you.
If I can just comment on Mark's before we move on to the next
Certainly,
one.
Jim.
This again is out of the autocratic or fascist playbook, is the creation of fear. And so they want people to gravitate to them because the power then will protect them, and they'll be on that right side. But if you think about the message that we learned from the 1930s, they came for somebody else, but not for me. And then there was no one left to speak for me. And I don't think we're overreacting. There is a movement going on at every single level, well-funded, and has been going on for decades, and they're getting to a crescendo level, and the nation is going to have to make a decision as to whether we want this apparent protector of strong autocratic direction as our savior, or if we want the messy, debated issues of democracy to prevail. And we are facing that, and that's that divisiveness that we have even in our own households and our relatives and families and close friends. The nation is truly divided, and we could go either way. And that's why we feel so strongly that organizations like yours with the veterans, we all need to come together and show that there's a unified voice, and that hopefully will be the power that people want to gravitate to, the power of democracy and the freedom of speech, as opposed to having to gravitate to this apparent power person or small group of people to tell us what we're supposed to think and do.
Those are terrific comments, Jim. And I see that one of our heroes is standing at the microphone. And because you don't know her, I'm going to take just a minute to introduce her. Her name is Ronna Bassini, and she's almost adopted our group. But Ronna is, she supported us almost from the very beginning. And one year we named her as our Thomas Paine Annual Award winner. And we did that because even though she was over 80 years old, she walked all the way to Tallahassee to get money out of politics. And so, Ronna, is a real hero. I couldn't even think about walking to Tallahassee, but she did it. And so, Rana, the floor is yours.
Okay. That was a one-off. You guys do things every single day. And I'd like to compliment the two gentlemen that spoke, because it's really wonderful to see retired people not on the golf course all day. I would like to interject a positive note, because I just got off a Zoom before I came here with a group called Kata, Conversations Across the Aisle. And that is they're exactly what they're doing. I think you've all heard of the Miracle on Longboat Key, where again, Republicans, Democrats, non-party people, whatever, are talking across the aisle. There are 4 different groups that I can think of that are about preserving democracy. What I think we need to do, getting the message across, absolutely. And yeah, we really need young people that know how to work all those devices. That was great that you guys are doing that. But I think we need to take a page from the March on Washington in 1963, because we have multiple groups all in different silos. We need to get them together, and maybe we need another MLK or another John Lewis, but we need, or Bayard Ruskin, who was the organizer. We need someone to organize us and get us out there, because getting the message across is fine, but you also need to be active. And there's a good note on the school board. I've gone to every school board meeting since 2016. Wow. And the last election was horrible. And woke didn't die. People woke up. And our side now is the ones that are showing up at the school board meetings. We've even turned a couple of the new members to vote our way. So people, when they hear the record, and more people are on our side, it's the 2 fringes. Both sides have fringes. Prejudice, they all say the right's worse. But we really, more people follow what you guys want to do, and we just have to get them to be active. And thank you all. You know I love you.
So Rana's comments are totally consistent with what we're trying to do, work together and keep our groups out of silos. I mean, that's very important.
Well, Rana said something that's really significant. I'm visualizing we've identified so many different pro-democracy groups just in the state of Florida. And if all of those groups could get organized together, not only with common messages, but on a walk to Tallahassee or whatever it takes, we'll follow Rana on that one. But her comment about being positive, I'll put in a little plug. Our October speaker is a gentleman by the name of Simon Rosenberg. And Simon was the person that predicted, there was the most significant political forecaster that predicted that 2022 would not be the massive red wave that everybody was expecting it to be. But he left an organization that he started, and he now has a blog called the Hopium Chronicles. And it's Hopium is hope and optimism. And so we have him coming in October after we beat ourselves up over the horrendous activities that are happening in education, to get a little hope and optimism through all of this, and to hear from Simon's perspective. He's about messaging, and he's about a messaging of hope and optimism. And we think about some of the transitions that have occurred in our nation. They've been not because of the negative and the hateful comments. They've been when we've painted us as an opportune nation that does have hope and optimism. So we need to take Rana's advice and find ways to go down that center and bring the largest group of people together to unify that we want to be pro-democracy, we want to have the openness of debates, and we want the freedom of speech to make that happen.
Jeff, do you have a comment on that?
No, I totally agree. The March on Washington in 1963 was a game changer, and maybe that's what we need. We need a game changer here in Florida.
Well, the game changer is, I think Jim said it very well and Rana said it very well, and that's hope and optimism. And we have hope and optimism on our side. And the reason I say that is because every poll that I see, basically the majority of the people want to do exactly what we want to do. They want to have a clean environment. They want to have clean drinking water. They want to make sure that their water is safe to drink. They want to combat climate change, and they want to combat climate change seriously by cutting down on fossil fuel use and using other types of energy like solar energy. And the hope and optimism comes from the fact that the majority of the people recognize this, and we can get the message out even better than we have in the past. And what that does, it allows us to have a more productive economy. It allows us to have a more equal economy. And that's what our population is in favor of. But these autocrats, they don't want that because they want to maintain the status quo for them, which maintains their power to do what they want to do, no matter what the majority wants to do. And I think it's important for us to understand that. Jim started off with a very good point. They're very well funded, and the funding comes from billionaires. They're in the fossil fuel business. They want to control water supplies, and democracy's in their way of doing what they want to do. And that's why, in the long run, I'm optimistic. Our group's optimistic. We have the hope and the optimism that we will win, but it's not going to be easy. We have to work and work and work together, just like you're saying and Rana's saying.
That's very true, but the politicians are just the vehicles. The people that are calling the shots are, Disney wouldn't kowtow to DeSantis. So what did he do? He openly punished him. This is, maybe we need to focus on boardrooms.
We do need to focus on boardrooms. We need to focus on our culture, and that's one of the reasons the culture is attacked. They like to make these culture wars because they know that people aren't mean. People don't want to be mean. People don't want to see neo-Nazis marching at Disney World. Is that something that Florida can be proud of? Of course not. But yet we see it, and our politicians, they won't speak out against it.
Right.
But we have to convince our fellow Americans and our fellow Floridians that that kind of behavior, neo-Nazism, is not acceptable in Florida.
Well said. Well said.
And so we have to work together harder and take it more seriously, because even though I'm optimistic, they're a threat, a realistic threat.
Yes, I would like to suggest that we consider reaching out to David Jolly, a former Republican congressman. He seems to be someone that has our ideas in mind. I'd like to kind of piggyback on what Rana said earlier. Is a organization called Retired Teachers, and last year or two, they went up to Tallahassee. I was part of that group, and they stood and petitioned for the teachers' programs. It's a very dynamic group. Years ago, when I first moved out of New York City, I ran into someone that was an arch Republican, someone who would fit in today. This is in 72. And he said the way to control is through the education school board.
Thank you, Bob. I appreciate those comments very much. Does anybody else in the audience have a comment?
So, Gene, if I can,
Yes.
Bob's comment sort of ties into one that's in your Q&A from Frank Levy. He says, are you aware that there are chapters of retired union teachers from New York City schools and others in Florida example, the United Federation of Teachers that have helped get out the vote via phone banks, even helping get out the vote of Floridians, Florida's East Coast. The last thing we want to do is unempower these phenomenal organizations, whether it's the League of Women Voters or these the teachers unions or whatever, that do a heck of a job and have worked very hard for decades at getting out the vote. We want to enhance that as opposed to suddenly tell everybody we're the expert at getting out the vote. But every voice needs to keep focusing on that. And then to tie back into, was it Bob? Is that the gentleman that just spoke?
Yes.
Okay. To tie that back into his, what if I've been impressed with what David Jolly has to say. What if this organization of veterans and Floridians for Democracy, using that veterans piece that Jeff mentioned earlier and how that resonates, and we invite David Jolly to a shared Zoom session, and we invite other groups to participate as well and work with him. I think he would respond favorably to veteran outreach, and it would be great to tie that in with Floridians for Democracy. Well, let's work together and make that happen.
Well, here's the way we often work. When an idea comes up, a good idea like this, we jump right on it. So can you take the bull by the horns on that, Jim, and set that up? And we're with you. We're ready to go right now.
All right. It'll be next Monday night at 7:00. David Jolly will be. No, I'm just teasing. But yes, we'll work together, Gene, and let's figure out how to make it happen.
Good. We're all on board. And when somebody else is at the microphone, I can't see who it is. Introduce yourself and speak up.
Hi, my name is Maria Reitz. My husband, Marshall, is the veteran, and he's the one who invited me here tonight. He's a member of the group. I just have a couple of things to say, and this is awful, but I was born in Cuba. I came in 1961 when I was only 6 years old, and I'm going to be honest, I'm so proud to be here, to be an American citizen, to be able to vote. But one of the things I'm seeing right now, that's what's going on in this country, is exactly what happened in Cuba. When the communists took over, the first thing they did is they put out propaganda. They took over the media. They closed the schools. I know we throw around the word indoctrination a lot. Let me show you what indoctrination is. They would take the kids to work camps and they would indoctrinate them. So I am petrified about what's happening in this country right now. The other point I wanted to make is, the thing about social media. I am on social media like 24/7. I love social media. That's how I get, all my crazy stories out and all this stuff. When you were talking about putting, I think the most important thing we need to do is get people to vote. And those of us that are on social media, like on Facebook or whatever, a lot of times the people that follow us, we're preaching to the choir. In other words, they're people that think like us. This is awful too, but a lot of the people that have just had horrible rhetoric, I've blocked them or whatever. So I guess my point is we need to figure out a way to get the message out to everybody, not just our friends and the people who think like us. But I think we need to figure out a way to get this message out to everybody so that they will get out there and vote. And I think we do it through just information as opposed to anything emotional. So if we can get out facts and information, I think that'll way to pull people in and just get them to go out and vote. So thank you. Gracias.
Well, thank you very much for those comments. And that fits in exactly with what Jim talked about when we started, that Floridians for Democracy, they're way ahead of us in many ways, that they apparently have an expert data and messaging group to help them. And hopefully we can tie into that. And,
yes. And the data that we can get on every single voter in Florida, we can tell who voted for whom, who didn't vote, how old they were, what their income level is. We have all that data. We can target exactly who we want to target. and we won't be preaching to the choir.
Excellent.
That means
Excellent.
that means our money is well spent.
Yes,
That's the key.
it's got to be well spent because we're probably maybe 100 or 200 to 1 in the spending category.
Not anywhere close to that even.
Not even close to that, probably. Yes, sir, Rich.
Hi, Jeff and Jim. This is Rich Scissors. I just wanted to pick up on a comment that I'm not sure which one of you made earlier about the number of registered Democrats and non-party affiliates that didn't vote. I don't know if you're aware of Nathaniel Stinnett and the Environmental Voter Project, but he found out a number of years ago that there were many people that were worried about the environment. They were registered to vote, but they weren't voting. I mean, it was a huge percentage, like maybe 80 or 90%. So the Environmental Voter Project is a project to send those voters. You have to register for this project, but once you do, the EVP will send you a notification, an email about every election down to school board that you're eligible to vote for in a timely manner so you can vote. So I'm going to put a plug in for preaching to the choir because we still need to motivate the choir here to get off and vote. Otherwise,
Good point, Rich. Rich, could you email us that person's name?
Yeah, sure. Sure.
Thank
Be
you.
happy to. And I don't know if you're aware of Citizens Climate Lobby, but well, I'm sure you can find videos of him. I'll send you his information. And also, I'd like to talk to both of you about coordinating social media efforts and stuff because I have that hat too.
Great.
We could
Great.
do a lot better.
So, Gene, do you want?
Rich is a wonderful volunteer. He was one of our volunteers of the year. And I would say basically he works full time on our projects. Without Rich, we couldn't operate. So, Rich, thank you.
What I just said, Gene and Jeff and a physician, but Dale, who has another pro-democracy group in Sarasota, and also Jill Spector from Sarasota, who's the education leader for the League of Women Voters. And I will all be on Tom Walker's program, radio program at 9 o'clock on Wednesday morning. And it'll be recorded and available afterwards for people to link into. But we're to the people that are asking, get the message out. We've got a lot of efforts to try to keep it. It's not just Southwest Florida with Sarasota, but we've got to do the same messaging throughout the entire state. And then we have to figure out how we bring all these various organizations together for that march on Tallahassee or whatever we need to do to get the word out.
And just another plug to follow up with that, Jim. Dale Anderson's group, Choose Democracy, and Floridians for Democracy and Florida Veterans were all co-sponsors of Professor Ruth Ben Jott's talk on Veterans Day. So we want to make sure for her talk that we fill that church and it's standing room only. And that is very important that we all do that. So everybody that's on this Zoom and everybody in the house needs to gather up 10 or 20 people to get them to that church so that we can hear her talk, because she really knows how these fascist movements work. And it's going to really motivate people to get out and take action. And so thanks for the plug there, Jim. Go ahead, Dennis, you have the floor.
Thank you. On the off chance that you gentlemen are not already familiar, each supervisor of elections can provide a list of all the registered voters in the county by Democratic or Republican or NPA affiliations. And you can use that list to target voters if you don't already have it. And also each county in the state has a Democratic Executive Committee that also uses that list to make phone calls to targeted voters to make sure they get out and vote. So you might want to coordinate your efforts through the local county executive committee in all 67 counties, or you can do it yourself by getting the list from your local supervisor of election. Just
Thank
FYI.
you. Thank you. Just want to reinforce again that those wonderful organizations we're not telling them that we know how to do it better. We want to be able to partner with them to enhance what they're already doing and make sure we get even more people out to vote.
Jim and Jeff, I see that it's past the hour. And so is there any final comments that you would like to make?
Yeah.
I think these types of events are extremely important for all of our organizations. And the dialogue between, I have 3 pages of notes. So thank you so much for having us.
Well, thank you for speaking, and thank you particularly for organizing your group. And we're going to be working together, and we're going to make an impact. I mean, when we say we're optimistic, we really are, because we know that we're the majority. And so all we have to do is just let people know that, and know that things don't have to be like they are, that they can be so much better. We can combat climate change. We can take serious action, and we can do a lot about the inequality if these authoritarians don't stand in our way. So we've got to build our democracy. I mean, that's the message for our group and all these other groups that we're working with. And so, Jim, why don't you wrap up for us?
You just said it. You just said it well. The opposite of hope and optimism is despair and no hope. So we've got to find ways to get people together. And you've clearly said it. The vast majority of the people want this to be a democratic nation, even with all of the challenge of an effective democracy with debate and disagreement, et cetera. It's a far better solution for us than a small group of people telling us what to think, live, and do. That's not the right direction for this nation. And on this 9/11, thanks for the opportunity to be with you. We know we were a last-second stand-in, but we're honored to be here. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and we appreciate it, and we'll definitely be in touch. We have a lot of work to do, and I hope everybody that's on the Zoom and everybody in the audience will take this talk tonight as motivation to work harder and do more. So with that, we'll adjourn the meeting. Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.